to work a 4-day, 32-hour work week. I gave her 24 hours to respond. She spoke to the higher-ups and finally came back the next day and agreed. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called LonelyCoconut9734. It says, impressed that the company had people smart enough to realize that a mistake had been made, and they worked to resolve it. OP, it sounds to me like you sold yourself short in this situation because I think this would have been a 25% raise situation, even though you wanted to work less time. You were the person with all the experience. You were the person they needed in that spot. You could have asked for a lot more money. Sure, 10% is good, but I would have started much higher and maybe then agreed on something smaller, like 20%. Coming up next, one decision from a fresh-faced MBA nearly derails an entire rail project. And the cost? Let's just say it's not pocket change. This story comes to us from BillIM201. Don't want to pay 4 guys to not work for 6 hours? Okay, you can pay 30 guys to not work for 6 hours. To make an already long story as short as possible, some background. I am a manager for a North American railroad, and a lot of our work involves different crafts of employees. Different crafts have different unions and different work rules. The managers of the other crafts and I work together well to get done what we need to get done, especially when some of the work needs to get done at night. The track guys can have a crew assigned to nights, while the signal guys can't. Even better, the signal guys who work overnight have to be let go after 12 hours. And if it's now their regular shift because they came in last night, they get paid the rest of the day to go home and sleep. Tack guys have all 3 shifts, but we only have a day shift and an evening shift, but no night shift, because the big hats don't want to hire enough people to do it. Now, the company has decided that paying guys to go home 2 hours early on a Thursday, come in and work overtime all night at 10 p.m., and go home at 10 a.m., getting another 4 hours pay to go home and sleep, is the ending of all that is good and pure in the universe, and will eventually lead to the collapse of capitalism, the nation, and indeed, the universe itself. So they decide that the second shift guys have to stay 4 extra hours, and the first shift guys have to come in 4 hours early. I point out that, 1, I can't force employees to work overtime unless it's an emergency, and the union isn't likely to agree that we want to do this at night so we don't affect traffic is an emergency. 2, not all employees are qualified on the same things. 3, since they took half of my trucks away 5 years ago because savings, I don't have enough vehicles for an entire second crew to show up at 2 a.m. and relieve the guys working in the field so they can go home. The guys currently working will have to stop work, pack up the tools, drive back to the office, let the smaller relief crew load up, drive back out to the worksite, do the starting paperwork and briefings, and begin the work. And most importantly, 4, that while we aren't there, the track guys can't work because we have to keep taking things off of the rail so that the track guys can do their work, and then put them back when the guys are done so we can run the trains in the morning. All of it falls on deaf ears because the freckle-faced college kid who opens every conversation with, "I have an MBA, darn it," who has somehow gotten to a position where he's in charge of the estimates, wants to complain about those 24 hours a night. So, after having gone on the meeting record for all of it, I get out of the kid's way. I decide that if my boss isn't going to have my back, I'm not going to stop this inevitable disaster. After all, I've only been doing this for 27 years, but he graduated with a 3.6 GPA from the University of Texas at El Paso, so he must know better. So, the first night, the job grinds to a halt like clockwork at 1 a.m. The second crew shows up at about 4:15, and they get to work. The track folks pack it in because by the time anything gets dismantled, there won't be enough time to get anything done and put it all back together to start moving trains by 7. Second night, the shift change was a little smoother, so they got out of there at 3:45, managed to get a little work done before packing up. Third and fourth night, it rained really hard, so the drive back to the shop and out to the job site took extra time. No work done after the new crew showed up at 4:30. Bright and early Monday morning, we show up at our morning meeting to find that the track guys got about 30% of the work done that they'd planned for the week, and at this pace would finish a 6-week job more than 15 weeks behind, and over budget by more than 300%. Mr. MBA proceeds to launch into his carefully rehearsed speech about key metrics, percent spend versus percent complete, and all sorts of other nonsense. He then decides to start in on me. Since I obviously conspired and colluded with my employees to egregiously erode progress for an entire week. I held up the meeting minutes from the previous week. I told him in no uncertain terms that he had asked, in fact demanded, that we had a full shift change in the middle of the track department's work. I looked across the table at him and asked him if he wanted to revise that position. Completely unwilling to let this lowly engineer tell him what to do, he said no, and I was supposed to somehow magically make the shift change faster. Next 3 weeks were the same story. They've now been out there for a month and have managed to accomplish just shy of a week and a half of work. Mr. MBA shows up on the site one night just in time to watch my night guys walk off, watch the track guys shut down the machines, and gather outside to smoke, hang out, and generally carouse because they now know they have 3 hours to screw off and be paid for it. My guys had called me when Mr. MBA showed up, so I get out of bed and get to the job site just in time to see this guy in his shiny, fresh from the package safety gear screaming at the top of his lungs to the guys to get back in their equipment and get the naughty word back to work. They all refuse because they all know that they can't work without us there. Not that they care all that much about our equipment, but because they know Mr. MBA has been throwing a little too much weight around, and nothing makes union employees stick together better or faster than putting the screws to a manager who really needs it. I walk up during a profanity-laced tirade and cut right in and say, well, Mr. MBA, I'm sure you're not suggesting that these qualified employees violate Rule XX, which clearly states that they shall not, under any circumstances, run that equipment through a switch that the signal department hasn't checked. Would you? That would be a serious violation, and could get him a 30-day suspension without pay. And if you were to suggest that he do that, you wouldn't have a union card in your pocket, and he would have 30 witnesses that saw you give him that directive. So you wouldn't be suggesting that, would you? He turned 3 shades of purple, stomped back to his little white company sedan, and drove away. He held on to his asinine mid-shift shift change for another 2 weeks until he couldn't hide the massive production delays from his boss anymore. And suddenly, he wasn't in charge of the estimates anymore. The total cost of his little venture? Just over $940,000 over the course of 6 weeks. But he did manage to save $700 a night on those off hours that he didn't have to pay for. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Cool Beans Chili. It says, whenever he tries to give you an order, just ask him, oh, so you want me to waste another $1 million? Opie responded and said, for some reason, he doesn't work in our department anymore. For the life of me, I can't imagine why. Does anybody else think that the requirement for an MBA should include having a tattoo on their arm that says, make sure you know how stuff works and why it works before you make any changes? Seriously though, an MBA can be good for some people and it definitely looks good on a resume, but for a lot of those people, MBA stands for Master of BS and Arrogance. Next up, not all acts of malicious compliance come from the workplace. Sometimes they happen right at the kitchen table. This story comes to us from Rigby Lou. The food is bad. My son has some special needs and is a reluctant reader and writer. He has never before taken initiative to read or write on his own. He is so enthusiastic about lots of other parts of learning. He is in OT and speech and has an IEP. He is, however, very gifted at finding the loophole in everything. It's entertaining and exasperating, and sometimes I'm just in awe. I made him lunch today, some chicken, rice, fresh fruit, and some snap peas, all things he normally likes. I thought it was a nice lunch. While he was eating, I had to make a call to schedule an appointment. He said, I don't like this tastes bad, I want something else, I don't want this for lunch. Since I was on the phone, I said, eat what you can please, I'm on the phone, and I don't want to hear you complain about your lunch again. He was very quiet for the next few minutes as I finished up my call. Then he handed me a piece of paper. My kid, who has never wanted to read or write, who I often have